All right, we're rolling. Welcome back. Again, my name is Rob Felgiano, and I'm reading from my book, God Laughs at Dirty Jokes. Happy New Year. I had hoped to actually do this part two a little sooner, but I got a little sidetracked because I was trying to arrange a little microphone setup. I bought a little preamplifier so I could have a little more volume, a little more control. It looks a little more like a broadcast, which is not really what I wanted, but it probably sounds better than the last one. It's probably a little clearer. So I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to get right to it. If you would like to watch the first video, that was the intro in chapter 1, and then I'll be beginning here with chapter 2. Because if you come in at chapter 2 without chapter 1, you will not know what I'm talking about at all. And I got my favorite mug from my mom. It's good advice. So you'll be seeing the non-advice side mostly. All right, here we go. Without further delay. Chapter 2, Bobbing for Answers. A few years after the 1997 tickling incident, its vividness receded. When it happened, I realized that the feeling was so powerful and special it would be nearly impossible to recall it the same way later. I stepped out of the shower that day, looked in the mirror and said, "Don't forget, this is the purest joy you've ever experienced." I felt there might never be an occurrence that intense again, perhaps until I die. I didn't immediately transform from an atheist into a believer, but the experience necessarily percolated. The meaning wasn't absorbed for years, and it's still subject to review. Not the fact that it happened, which isn't in doubt, but whether there's anything specific I should do with the knowledge. It's a tricky thing. I need to be careful not to go around trying to indoctrinate other people like the religious extremists I disliked in high school, but I'm thrilled at the discovery and want to share it. Intermittent events followed over the next several years. The next big thing was a method of communication with the other side, which I call head bobbing. Head bobbing. Unseen visitors usually arrive when I'm close to waking or falling asleep, early in the morning or late at night. I need to be somewhat relaxed to get a connection, and usually lying on my back in bed when it begins. When a spirit is trying to communicate, I sense its presence. There's intense pressure in the middle of my forehead where the third eye supposedly resides. I've not read much about chakras, but my experiences seem to match things I've heard. The visitor gently moves my head. It feels like they're inhabiting the front of my brain. Excuse me. Once they've announced their arrival this way, I try to figure out what kind of visitor it is. I only feel presences, not see or hear them, though many times it seemed like a face would emerge from the wispy gray shapes that float in my third eye. I think this is because I'm not sure I want to see them. Unseen visitors aren't frightening, but I haven't worked my way up to full visions. I've seen the chalky white outlines of faces and eyes in the darkness. The images change quickly, like passing cloud shapes collapsing and forming. Sometimes the brief images appear cubist, and that the same facial outline is seen from multiple overlapping angles at once. More recently, the clouds turn colors, most often between metallic purple, green, and blue. The tones are muted and dark, like in the days of movie film. I stumbled on the idea that I could ask my frequent visitors questions and receive non-verbal answers. To communicate, I ask a question aloud in my mind, and answers are given as either a yes or a no via the gentle movement of my head by the visitor. If my head bobs up and down, the answer is yes. Side to side means no. Is my demonstration helping, or am I being too obvious? Each encounter begins by asking if the spirit visitor is well-intentioned. This weeds out most of the unfriendlies because they're poor liars. I say/think something like, "Have you come with good intentions and through the white light of God?" Friendly forces have a light vibe and answer questions quickly, without hesitation, like an honest person with nothing to hide. They provide unambiguous assurance. If there's an awkward pause during the screening process, it usually means the visitor is up to something. An unfriendly might try to lie and give an up and down head shake, but a weak affirmative almost always slips into a side-to-side motion indicating no, or after a few more questions. Anytime the feeling is uncertain, it's best to break it off. The connection is easily cut. I tell them to run along and play elsewhere, open my eyes, or sit up in bed. Spirits don't have much power in this realm unless we allow them to influence us, or over a long period of time to court and seduce us. I prefer the term unfriendlies to evil spirits because some unfriendlies are not necessarily evil, just mischievous. Some like to play tricks and mess with your mind, much like the confused, screwed up people we've all come across. People like this are likely to be much the same in the next world unless they work to improve. It's part of the journey of the soul. Excuse me. All right. Once a visitor seems trustworthy, we chat. I ask about life and spiritual ideas or whatever comes up. I refer to the encounters as picking up spiritual traffic. We're surrounded by spirits and intelligence at all times and can tune into it like dialing a radio station. Visitors usually approach me to start a conversation, but more recently when I ask if there are any presences around, there almost always are. 100 billion people have already lived on the planet. That's a lot of potential spirits floating around, though they're not confined to Earth. More on that later. The afterlife, heaven, the other side, the realm of spirits, or whatever term you prefer, is overlaid directly on this world, but exists at a super high vibration and is otherwise imperceptible. It's not a separate place in the clouds. When you're spiritually aligned, you can communicate more consistently and reliably. All right, coffee pause, pardon me. Okay. Several times the friendly head bobbing has turned into a full body shake, with vibrations traveling all the way down through me. I've been playfully rocked back and forth like a carnival ride. On a few occasions, the vibrations have actually been so intense that I flipped over in bed. Yeah, really. That was crazy. Tossed like a salad while laughing in surprise. Being thrown around has been too joyful to be frightening. It's like when you play fight with your dad or grandpa as a child and he picks you up and pretends to roughhouse you but drops you gently on the couch. You never feel unsafe even though he has far more strength. It's all the excitement of danger without any fear because there's trust. I never expected to have these experiences. It was a shock to find my beliefs changing, but to ignore the events would have been a denial of reality. Scientists rely on proof and testable hypotheses. For my family, physical evidence has been provided, but it's not a game. These are deep secrets. I want to be respectful of things I can't fully understand. I don't know if there's such a thing as a single God or maybe a collection of omnipotent creators, or whether the universe itself is God with us inside of it, or if it's some kind of quantum computer and we're all little bits of information running on the grand hard drive, or something else entirely. I hesitate to use the word God to describe the infinite because it's loaded and has been co-opted by many groups of supposedly religious people whose behavior is more sheepish or cult-like than spiritual. They've forgotten the message of Jesus but worship the creeds, according to songwriter Matt Johnson. Without charity, love, empathy, and forgiveness as its foundation, religion squanders its promise. But as a form of shorthand and to communicate with others on the subject, I've grown accustomed to calling it God. Whatever it is belongs to every living being in the universe. When people of faith and hope, of any religion or no religion at all, pray, it's to the same higher power. God loves everybody and doesn't take sides. You don't need to be formal. It's not even praying. It's simply talking to God and good spirits. You don't need to be on your knees or in a church. No specific rituals are required. These things can get in the way. Your intentions matter most. Your honesty and humility are required. You can sit in a chair and ask, "What's up, God? Can you hook me up with some of that sweet love and joy? How's it hanging in heaven?" I bet you could make God laugh if you come up with a good zinger. The God I believe in finds cornball humor funny when it's not mean-spirited. I think God appreciates ridiculousness because he, she, it knows existence can be extremely hard on mortals and life is absurd, just as the total absence of life would be absurd. The God I believe in laughs at dirty jokes. Hell, God probably tells the best ones. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 2 of God Laughs at Dirty Jokes. Pardon me while I itch my nose off screen. Okay, success. All right, we're going to move on to chapter 3, which is called Steve's Visions. Just take a little look ahead and see how many pages that is so I can time out the video a little bit. I'll go sort the one after it. Okay, all right, very good. Okay, continuing on. Chapter 3, Steve's Visions. My younger brother Steve has had more detailed communications with the other side than I do. It seemed very natural to him when it first happened. He never sought it. He gets beautiful full-color visions. He's left his body and his wheelchair and traveled to fields of flowers under sunshine and describes the colors as heightened and unearthly with a reddish tint. Steve often speaks with our deceased brother Justin. One time, Justin's face was indistinct and cloudy, and Steve asked him if he could improve the image. His features sharpened like someone had adjusted a lens. And Steve could see him clearly. Justin looks like Steve and I, with thinning brown hair and the same Italian cleft chin. He wears a gold necklace when he visits Steve because it's the purest metal, forged in the largest stars, and unfriendly imposters have difficulty imitating it when they call disguised as him. This is in parentheses here. If you're ever besieged by unfriendly spirits, it helps if you calmly ask for the white light of God to envelop you. Think of bright light as truth and purity, or God's flashlight. Unfriendlies have trouble withstanding the light because their existence is based on deception, and they hide in pockets of darkness like rats. An angry response to an assault by unfriendlies won't help you. Believe me, I've tried, and I detail it later. Don't imitate the priest in The Exorcist. The most powerful resistance comes from the calmest frame of mind and spirit. End of parentheses. I believe Steve gets more detailed visions and can engage in verbal conversations with visitors because he's one of the most decent people I know. He rarely gets angry and is almost always smiling and laughing. When I meet pretentious people, I might imagine kicking them in the metaphoric crotch, but Steve practices restraint while sizing them up and is deeply perceptive. He lacks casual cruelty or pettiness. Surely spirits and the moral universe are aware and keep track. Everything matters. There's no hiding in the end. We learned about another way spirits can communicate with the living. It involves vibrations, which we'll get into shortly. Steve is a reluctant medium. His modesty prevents him from thinking of himself as one or claiming a title or trying to profit from it. I'm like this too, to a less saintly extent. We possess bits of a gigantic puzzle of unknowable, possibly infinite size. I don't expect to acquire all the pieces while human, or maybe ever. That's probably how it should be for anyone reaching, impossibly, to comprehend creation. The universe plays by some physical rules that can be discovered and measured, but the sheer vastness encourages humility. Gina, a friendly psychic I met last summer in Fort Erie, Ontario, told me that mediums are in demand by spirits because they're one of the few means by which they can pass messages to loved ones here. Mediums can essentially become overwhelmed because there's literally a waiting line of spirits trying to get their attention and enlist their help. Steve learned this lesson firsthand. Deceased relatives of family, friends, and acquaintances drop in unannounced, literally when he's brushing his teeth or trying to sleep, asking him to contact living relatives. The information Steve's been given about family pets or inside jokes that only the recipient would understand are things he'd have absolutely no way of knowing otherwise. More proof that we're not imagining things. Okay. Unfortunately, forwarding messages has occasionally bitten him in the ass. Several years ago, Steve attended a local church. It was more of a social activity to make new friends, not to support a specific faith. Though he attended Saturday evening youth activities, we would still make fun of the overenthusiastic Holy Rollers and make references to Jeebus, Homer Simpson's moronic mispronunciation. Steve received a message from the deceased grandmother of a young woman named Brenda who went to church. By the way, all the names in this book have been changed, except my brother's and my mom's. Then she ratted him out. Okay, sorry. Let me start again. Steve received a message from the deceased grandmother of a young woman named Brenda who went to church. Steve passed it on, but Brenda didn't believe him. Then she ratted him out to the whole church, and one of the youth leaders wrote him a letter of concern. Steve felt ostracized and sad. Mom and I were mad and ready to crack some skulls, as is our hot-blooded nature. Brenda's grandmother returned to apologize to Steve and told him she was disappointed in her granddaughter's behavior. Consider the extreme fucking irony of a bunch of people who claim to believe both in God and his immaculate magical son who walked the earth performing miracles 2,000 years ago, not believing an innocent messenger like my brother when he delivered accurate news from their dead relatives. What a crock of shit. These phony Christians were more interested in being narrow-minded wolf pack than in seriously considering the deeper possibilities of spirituality. Steve stopped going to church. It wasn't fun for him anymore, even though all involved eventually apologized after Mom blasted the youth leader with a letter from her Sicilian pen. It's their loss, and I get angry remembering how they made him feel. Okay. Let's see. More than a decade ago, Mom helped Steve transition to a comfy, handicap-accessible apartment in a nice complex near her house. He was hesitant to leave home, but has grown to love his own space. Most of the retiree tenants look out for him and know Steve by his given first name, Samuel, or Sammy, after our grandpa Falgiano. Steve is his middle name. But a few of the crusties, as Steve jokingly, affectionately refers to them, are cranky. Lately, Steve has been having dreams which actually accurately predict future events. The night before a mildly annoying exchange with a senior tenant, Steve dreamt that Mildred would give him grief about purchasing a ticket for a summer cookout occurring later in the week. Mildred had decided, without advance notice, that the cutoff for buying the $3 ticket was 48 hours prior to the event, and Steve was past her deadline. In Steve's dream, she leaned over and put her hands on his wheelchair arms, violating his personal space, standing above him in intimidation. He couldn't hear what she was saying, but he felt the intent. The next day, the real-life exchange played out exactly as in the dream, but since Steve saw it coming, he wasn't rattled. He maintained his composure and informed her that she hadn't given any notice, but that was fine, and he wouldn't attend. Steve looked in Mildred's eyes, amused that she had no idea he saw her coming a mile away. A woman named Elsie overheard their exchange and volunteered her extra ticket, which Steve gratefully accepted. Later, he left an envelope with $3 inside Elsie's mailbox, but she returned it to him. At the cookout, another senior named Patty invited Steve to sit with her and her friends. As you know, seniors love gambling, bingo, and raffles. Patty purchased several 50-50 lottery tickets for the luncheon from Mildred and gave one to each of her friends at the table, including Steve. He said, "I never win, but if I do, I'll split the pot with you." Sure enough, Steve won the $60 prize and gave half to Patty. Of course he did, I thought. How could he not? I told Steve I was looking forward to heaven because I will point my finger at Mildred and remind her of her pettiness, how shamefully she behaved. That's the petty, vengeful side of me, but always on behalf of the honest underdog. Seriously, don't blame my brother or anyone else. You don't even know what you're messing with spiritually. I said if Mildred knew what we know about spirits and eternity, she'd probably be kissing his feet instead. I wrote this book. This book came out in 2014. So that's the end of chapter 3, by the way. So it's interesting because even in the 6 years since it came out, I've changed even from what's written here. That's inevitable, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I even see that I don't know that. I think this is a little bit of the harshness of maybe the end of that chapter is something that I don't feel as strongly now. What are you gonna do? But anyway, so that's chapters 2 and 3 of God Laughs at Dirty Jokes. I think that the closed captioning, I forgot to mention, should be working automatically on these videos. It was pretty accurate for the first video. So if you want, there's somewhere in the settings you can click on closed captioning and it'll show you the text at the bottom as I'm reading it to you. And if you happen to want to purchase the book, it's available through my website, robfalgiano.com, or you can find it as a digital or book version on amazon.com or barnesandnoble.com. So I think that's about it for now. I'll just mention that I have been working on, I guess what you would call the sequel to the book. Loosely, I've been working on it for 2 or 3 years. The early title is called Life is Magic, and I have so much stuff written, it frightens me. I have about, I think this book was about 80,000 words in all, which is, pretty typical for a book this size. And right now I've got about 120,000 words, and I got a lot of work to do on it still. But a lot of that comes down to really refining it, editing, because at least with my writing, I find that I'll write, when I'm writing just in raw form, when it's just spilling out, I might take 6 sentences to say what could really be said in one, and then that's where the editing and the refining comes in, where you just whittle away everything that isn't necessary, kind of like a sculptor. You take away what isn't the sculpture, or cut away what isn't the book. So hopefully the audio quality is better now that I got my little fancy, you can see it, my little fancy Steinberg amplifier for the microphone. Whoops. And so I'll be back shortly with chapters probably 4 and 5 for the next one. So hope you're well. Take care. Enjoy the new year. Enjoy the new energy of the new year. Astrologically, there's a lot of good stuff coming. Better times ahead is the general feeling from the astrologers that I follow. So that's my message for the day, I guess. Better times ahead. Okay, take care of yourself. Bye-bye.